All right. Welcome everybody. So we finished our last night we finished our first session with Kristeva on the need to believe. And today I am doing this sort of second session. It's a little bit early to be doing the second session on the need to believe. But I was able to actually finish the reading last night, ironically. So I figured that because I finished the reading last night and I definitely plan on reading it again, um, I want to talk about specific impressions that kind of came out with Kristeva's argument about the need to believe, our the argument about our needing to believe, and how Kristeva possibly perceives a sublimation of that need to believe. Um, One argument from Kristeva that I found really interesting. And she brings up, Freud's notion a little bit, with like, how can we, uh, you know, look at Freud's understanding of beliefs as illusions, which he upfrontly says it's, a superficial reading. But anyways, typically there's always a lot of talk about the paternal function and how that plays a role in our child's development. This is like very traditional kind of Freudian theory, which I won't get into. But I will say that Kristeva is bringing up another element of in the conversation, which is what she calls the mother's passion and the child, and something that we really talked about a lot in our last session was that why do we let people believe in something? And this question is meant to be more of a provoking thought in terms of typically, if we are in a loving relationship, we don't want to fracture that believing immediately. And why do we typically let that happen? Why do we let the belief come forth? And why do we acknowledge the belief? Um, and how do we deal with that? Right. So Kristeva is giving an argument, it seems, about what she calls the mother's passion. The mother's passion for Kristeva is something that can bring out in the child its own singularity and autonomy and creativity. So this need to believe, you could say that to sublimate it, our need to believe, we need to be able to bring out in each other our own singularity, autonomy, and creativity. Obviously, Kristeva goes through elements of talking about like the kind of humanism that essentially she believes in. Um, but it's a humanism that is predicated, what she calls, on genius, right? But genius is something for her a little bit more sentimental, meaning it's about bringing out the singularities within individuals. Um, but she gives a really good um, a kind of a semblance of how possibly this sublimation from needing to believe transforms into creativity, autonomy, and singularity. I think you could say the question I'm left with by Kristeva is she's almost in a roundabout way suggesting that our need to believe tends to obfuscate our singularity, our autonomy, and our creativity. And that's something to really think about. Um, but, anyways, I wanted to read this specific passage to you guys because I thought it was really good and it's a lot to talk about. Maybe it's something that we can bring up in our next session, but I think it's a really good prep to talk about. So Kristeva says here, page 43, on the incredible need to believe, and then through a couple pages afterwards, she goes, I cannot overemphasize the apprenticeship of language by the child implies a re-apprenticeship of language by the mother. In projective identification of mother and child, the progenitor inhabits the mouth, the lungs, the digestive tube of her offspring. And in accompanying the echolalia, guides them toward signs, phrases, tales. Infans becomes infant, a speaking subject. As this takes place, each mother accomplishes in her own way her Proustian search for lost time. It is in speaking the language of her child that a woman, step by step, remedies the non-congruence, as cognitists say, the abyss between affect and cognition, of which the hysteric endlessly complains. So she's talking about this kind of identification. The mother identifies with the child, and by identifying with the child, she is able to basically become again a kind of new speaking subject, right? Which is very interesting. That will be something interesting to talk about. Um, and then she proceeds, she goes, as for time, which in Western philosophy always refers to the time of death, which also, of course, haunts the experience of motherhood, the mother's experience of time is marked by another kind of, I think she says, caesura, that of the beginning. Of course, both parents are aware that conception and childbirth are the principal initiating acts, but the mother feels this even more strongly because her own body is implicated. So basically, because the mother gave birth to the child, there is a more visceral connection to that bodily beginning again. Um, at least that's how I kind of understand her argument for this. Um, she says, for her, birth's new beginning is not only a conjuration of death. Philosophers teach us that freedom's logic does not reside in a transgression as one might easily think, but in the capacity to begin. Winnicott himself suggests that the baby's exit from the womb towards birth only takes place when it is sufficiently free in its movements, when it reaches a certain level of biopsychological completion, a certain autonomy, beginning and autonomy. So this is interesting that she's basically saying they almost go hand in hand. Beginning and autonomy is coming out of the womb. Um, and it's interesting that Kristeva is going from the adolescent unconscious, right? Talking about the adolescent unconscious, and then she's bringing us back to this mother-child projective identification. And the way she's bringing us back is through this kind of analogy of like, I guess Winnicott said something similar of like, well, this idea that that the child is not free until it frees itself, till it comes out, um, and this is also the beginning of their autonomy. So to proceed on reading, for this psychoanalyst might well be two aspects of the same state, so beginning and autonomy. The time of the mother is confronted with this opening, with this beginning, or with beginnings in the plural, when she brings several children into the world and when she becomes a grandmother with her grandchildren. The ephemerality of the life we give doubtless brings with it worries and anxieties, but these are covered up by a feeling of wonderment before the ephemeral, seen as a re-beginning. I call the maternal experience of temporality, which is neither the instant nor the inexorable passage of time, which preoccupies men more easily obsessive than women, a duration with new beginnings. Freedom means having the courage to start over, Such is the philosophy of maternity. Um, and I think I will read one more passage. And then she goes, thus I arrive at the maternal passion's capacity for sublimation because it is a continuous sublimation. Maternal passion makes a child's creativity possible. The acquisition of language and thought by the child depend upon the paternal function as well as upon maternal support. How could this happen if women themselves were incapable of sublimation, as Freud insinuated? So she's kind of taking a jab at Freud here for this. The founder of psychoanalysis advanced this excommunication recklessly, perhaps having in mind hysterical excitability, refractory to symbolization. On the other hand, and unlike the hysteria of which it is not unaware, maternal passion enacts a transformation of the libido such that sexualization is postponed by tenderness, whereas narcissistic exaltation with its melancholic underside, all the way to maternal madness with its lasting grip, yields to a sublimatory cycle in which the mother constitutes herself in differentiating herself from the newborn. So there's a lot there, but you notice how she said that the acquisition of language not only depends upon the paternal function, but also the maternal support. I think she brilliantly phrased this on purpose, this idea of calling it the maternal support. Because after all, she did kind of say, I mean, maybe this is coincidental, I don't know, but she did kind of say it in the beginning, like, what supports our need to believe? What is holding that need to believe? And I think there's a way to look at it like that. But I think she's also saying how it's that same support that can also give you the capacity to sublimate this thing. So it's that very passion itself that is capable of bringing out sort of creativity. Of course, there's a lot, more to go into this and talk about, personal wise. But it's funny to me that last session we were already talking about kind of motherhood and what does it mean to believe in motherhood. And we kind of hinted around some of these upcoming things that Kristeva was talking about. But now we have a kind of better picture of what Kristeva is talking about with a couple of themes, right? Beginning again, having the courage to begin again. I think that already is something very similar to sublimating a belief. Because oftentimes it does disappoint us. It can throw us into a melancholic, suicidal depression kind of thing, or kind of nihilism. But having this courage to begin again, to have a reacquisition for language. I think we did talk about this in some ways last session about how even in our believing of language, we have to reapproach it. We have to always have the courage to start and speak again. So there's a lot there with Kristeva to think about our needing to believe and how to sublimate that in our argument of maternal passion. What does that really mean in a kind of way? And I think we can look at maternal passion as something that brings out the singularity, the autonomy, the creativity. And yeah, I mean, the question that I'm left with by Kristeva after reading the sections that I kind of signed is she implying that our need to believe blocks our singularity and creativity? Is that what is fundamentally blocking us, right? Is our needing to believe in something blocking our creativity and autonomy? Is that something that we need to free ourselves from? That's another thing that I think is worth talking about in a real personal way. But anyways, hope you guys take care.